Good morning. My name is Benoist, a technology research specialist working for Natixis in London, and it is my pleasure, in partnership with Audacia, to introduce this new webinar on the rather preoccupying topic of the war economy. The words may sound shocking, but they are indeed the words that were chosen by President Macron in 2022, just a few months into the brutal invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces. Obviously, a war economy is not the same as an economic war, a concept that we are much more familiar with here in the banking industry. Historically, it refers to a country reorganizing its entire economic system, industries, workforce, resources to prioritize and support the military needs during conflict. Now, we will dig further into this concept in a few minutes, but clearly a quick stroll in the streets of London or Paris or Madrid or Milan will tell you that we are still quite far from the dark days of the Second World War. What President Macron was actually telling us was that France and Europe had to start preparing for the worst, something which after 80 years of peacetime remains a non-trivial exercise, to say the least. Unfortunately, the rapid evolution of international geopolitics, and in particular reduced US support for conflicts like Ukraine, are only accelerating the need for a more strategically autonomous European continent. But beyond the obvious questions of defense budgets, this introduces a number of highly complex challenges. European markets remain small and fragmented, with the prevalence of national procurement programs. Proliferation of norms and standards make it really difficult for any company in the defense sector to reach any form of critical size. European armies must also modernize and integrate new technologies such as AI to remain competitive and close the gap with America and China, implying a much more substantial effort in research and development. And finally, in many European countries, military innovation is in the hands of a very large number of small but fragile businesses, which now find themselves in the difficult situation of having to face tighter delivery deadlines, surging volumes, whilst access to finance remains problematic. So what will it take to overcome challenges in sovereignty, innovation, and funding to secure a robust defense future? To help us answer these questions, we have a fantastic panel of experts today in the studio, starting with Jean-Baptiste Kerveillant, who is Deputy Director at the Direction Générale de l'Armement and is in charge of the protection and resilience of businesses. Welcome. We then have Guilhem de Marliave, CEO of Elistair, a French company specializing in tethered drone technologies for the defense and civil sector. Vianney Merchez, you are Executive Vice President at ATDI Group, another French company developing electronic war solutions and software that are currently actively deployed on the ground in Ukraine. Exactly. Thomas Schmitz is Investment Director at Audacia for the Straton Fund, which is a private equity fund dedicated to aerospace and defense. And you will share with us your experience of investing into this war effort. And finally, my excellent colleague, Hadrien Camatte, Senior Economist at Natixis CIB, who will help us understand the latest developments in European war economics. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember that you can ask your questions on the sidebar on your screens, and we shall try to answer as many of them as possible before the end of this session. Now, Hadrien, I would like to maybe start with you. 3 years ago, almost to the day, President Macron spoke for the first time of France's entry into a war economy. Okay, but what is a war economy exactly, and what was President Macron? What was his message?
Well, first of all, it's not surprising that President Macron expressed his willingness to spend more than 3 to 3.5% of GDP to defense, well before the NATO summit, the June NATO summit, and this is a new core target, and we will discuss it, of course, a bit later. So it's not a surprise to see this from President Macron. let's start to answer your questions regarding war economy. First, regarding France. France is spending close to 2% of its GDP to defense. Well, that's not war economy, definitely. Ukraine is a war economy. Ukraine is spending close to 40% of its GDP to defense and to military spending. And I think this 40% figures is quite interesting because during World War II, 40% was also the figure for Germany, it was the figure for the UK and for the US. And even just before the end of World War II, Germany spent more than 70% of the GDP to war. So definitely 2%, I'm sorry to say it, it's not war economy. Ukraine, it was 4% before Ukrainian war, so close to new targets, but definitely that's something different. And just to conclude on it, just talk about Israel, for example, a kind of hybrid war, that's close to 10% of GDP. So 2% is definitely very small, and I think something close to 4% is a pre-war level, but when you are at war, it's close to 10 or 40%.
Right. And so with the help of the new Trump administration, I think concept seems to be taking shape a little bit more. And in particular in Europe, there's been a wake-up call, as we often hear, right? Can you maybe briefly remind us what are the latest, what is the latest in Europe in terms of defense budget and what's being allocated to the topic, particularly following the recent NATO summit?
Yeah, so that's quite simple. 5% is a new 2%, or more exactly 3.5% is a new 2%, because at constant perimeter, a constant scope, because the new NATO summit fixed a new spending target at 5%, and it includes a 3.5% target for core defense spending and 1.5% target for, let's say, related defense spending. And so that's a bit more fuzzy, a bit more uncertain. So let's say I think 3.5% is definitely the good definition. So how to finance this extra spending? First, borrowing at national levels. That's credible for Germany, but the problem in Europe is that many countries have very limited fiscal space. That's the case for France, but also for Italy, or even for many other countries. So as the European Commission launched the EU ReArm program, that's up to 800 billion euros, up to, that's not 800 billion euro, up to, divided between 650 billion euro for national escape clause, so that's a possibility to borrow more, that's just a possibility, and France, for example, or Italy declined to use this extra borrowing yet due to their super high public deficit, and 150 billion euro for the Safety Action for Europe instrument. Otherwise, you can use, of course, dedicated instrument that already exists. For example, use the European Investment Bank or BPI France at the national levels. I think private equity is also a key, and Audacia definitely has a key role to play in financing new defense spending. And okay, let's be optimistic for the future. Maybe supranational spending could be a solution, such as NGU programs, but at this stage there are many political hurdles, so that's too soon to say for now.
So do you think, obviously Germany is going to drive this massive effort, they have probably a lot more room than we have elsewhere in Europe. Do you think France can keep up with our German friends?
Okay, so Germany has an ambition regarding military spending, and Friedrich Merz, the new chancellor, already indicated at the Bundestag that he targeted for the German Bundeswehr, the German army, to be the first conventional army in Europe by 2030. So that's huge, and it targets 3.5% of military spending target by 2030. So before the NATO target. And is it credible? Yes, because Germany has the fiscal space to increase dramatically its defense spending. So that's credible that they will do it. Regarding France, of course, that's complicated. So we are still at 2%, that's good, but to increase defense spending, it will require some reallocation. So that's not a bad news, but it means that on the one hand, you have to decrease, for example, some spending or raising tax, but in order to finance this extra spending. But as I mentioned, the fiscal space is limited, and we will need some other tools to finance it.
Okay, so just a little bit of publicity now. we've just issued this new report that came out yesterday, which is cross-expertise from the entire research department of Natixis, including your views. I did contribute a little bit as well. It's a 40-page paper with a lot of insight from specialists in every kind of asset class and from our colleagues around the world as well on the topic of defense. Feel free to reach out if you would like a copy. In the meantime, here's one for you. I've got another one here. It's present distribution. I will send electronic copies anyway. Right, enough publicity. Jean-Baptiste, I know that as part of your role, you've been looking into the transition into this war economy, and you have basically been studying the strengths and weaknesses of the country from that respect, and identified a number of choke points or bottlenecks. Could you maybe tell us a little bit more about those bottlenecks that you've identified between now and the transition to war economy?
Yes, I will. I just would like to come back on the terminology war economy. We agree that we are not in a war economy, but this expression was used. It was like a wake-up call, saying, okay, look at what's happening in Europe, in Ukraine, at our borders, and we realized that we didn't have the capacity to produce enough to face a high-intensity war. And so we have to hear war economy as getting ready for a high-intensity war. But it's not only a slogan, it's very concrete. So the objective were threefold: produce more, better, and faster. And we have some concrete results, like the acceleration of production of Aster missiles, for instance, the multiplication by 60 of the production of shells, of the cannon Caesars by 3, etc., etc. So this ramp-up has already begun, and it's still ongoing. But the war economy, it's 5 pillars, and then I will come back to the bottlenecks. So it's, first of all, give the defense industry more visibility, in particular through public procurement. So we have the LPM, so the Defense Programming Law, giving visibility up to 2030. And yet, yes, today we are at 2% of GDP of defense effort. 10 years ago, it was much less. So 2% is not a lot, but it's already way higher than what it was 10 years ago. Second pillar, secure supply chains by remedying bottlenecks, reconstituting strategic stockpiles, and relocating production. And we have already 11 relocating projects. Simplify equipment for the armed forces, as well as standards and administrative procedures. Mobilize the nation's human resources. And finally, strengthen the resilience of the defense industrial base, and namely resilience, security, cybersecurity, and also access to finance. I think we'll come back to that later. But for bottlenecks, so first of all, we had to identify which were these bottlenecks. And we focused on the military equipment that we wanted to export to Ukraine and some other critical equipment. And we realized that around 200 critical subcontractors were bottlenecks, meaning that the production depended on them. And so we did two things. First of all, we have a program with BPI France, the French public bank, called the Defense Accelerator, aimed at optimizing the industrial production of these bottlenecks. And so every year we have 30 to 40 bottlenecks that are treated, solved through this Defense Accelerator program. But we also make sure that they have the right level of security, cybersecurity and security, physical security. And so for that we have different subsidies, and we have our security benchmarks for cyber and for security that we promote to them. And finally, we think that they are priority to get better access to finance. And so that's something that we work on, but I think once again, we'll come back to that later. So first, we had to map the bottlenecks and then to act, and it's still ongoing.
And so if we focus on the finance element, I think in France, the industrial defense and technological ecosystem composed of more than 4,500 companies, often small businesses, often with fantastic innovation capabilities, and we've got two brilliant examples of that here. 1,000 of these companies are considered strategic by the DGA, but for them access to finance is perhaps the most crucial issue. How do you actually facilitate or help them have a better access to funding overall?
Yes, it's very critical because most people, when they think of the DTIB or the BITD, think that we have military companies producing, for instance, Caesar cannons, etc. So it does exist, but most companies in the DTIB are dual use, meaning, for instance, sometimes on average they have 15 to 20% of their output for defense forces. And so the public orders is necessary, but it's not enough. And these companies are, for most of them, we think, a bit too small. And so the sector needs to consolidate. And for that, we need the support of the private equity, for instance, but also the market, the stock market. And so that's why we, with Bercy, so with the Ministry of Finance, we decided to host an event in Bercy where both ministries of finance and of the armed forces said that we needed to invest more in the DTIB, in our defense industry. So that was very important. Why? Because this is still a sector, or that was a sector that was somewhat stigmatized because not ESG or these kind of things. And so both ministries had said, okay, this situation is too important. We have to invest a lot with the public orders, but with private investment too in this sector. That was the first step. Second step is what we launched 1 week ago at Ballard, our ministry. It was the launch of the Club des Investisseurs de la Défense, so the Defense Investor Club, where we, DGA, we built a network of private investors saying, okay, you don't know very much the defense sector, and so we are here to explain how we work, first of all, and what is this sector, what are these companies, because there are some false ideas. And secondly, we can make the link between the company needs of financing and the investors. And so that was launched 1 week ago, and there was a lot of success because 1.5 years ago, there were maybe 3-4 private investors saying, okay, we are interested in this sector. So now we have 50, 60, 70 investors saying, okay, we want to invest in the DTIB. So not all of them will have a specific dedicated vehicle, but it's not a problem. But some of them will have. And we need financiers at every level of the scale, so for the small cap segment, mid cap, large cap, and the stock market too. So we build on all these, we work on all these streams.
Good. Thomas, I guess you're part of that club now.
We were there last week. We were there.
Excellent. Okay, I guess let's hear a little bit about companies who are actually working on the ground here. And maybe I'll start with you, Guilhem, and ask you to introduce briefly your company and what you're doing, what your technology is, and what's the story.
So Elistair is a French drone manufacturer. We are based in Lyon. We also have a presence in North America. The company is 10 years old. We are 60 people, and we are the leading manufacturer of tethered drones. So our technology basically is a drone that can fly for days in a row compared to standard drones that can powered with battery and that can only fly for 1 hour top. And it's through a micro tether. We provide power and we secure all the communication. So the drone cannot be jammed, and it's used. Main use cases are border control. We use it also for tactical communications, forward operating base surveillance, and civilian use case like firefighting and large event surveillance. So we had the system, for instance, on 2 Super Bowls, the Ryder Cup, Olympics, and so on. We do a lot of exportation, so we are 85% outside of France. We are dual use, 50% military, 50% civil use. And our customers in the military include mostly allied forces in Europe and North America.
Right. So if we go to back to the technology, so there's like a very small cable at the back of the drone. Does that make it more difficult to maneuver? Or?
So it's the use case is quite simple. It's let's say a pocket satellite that any platoon can have. Instead of just the HQs, we provide aerial intelligence at the platoon level. So the idea is they have a kind of an overwatch, fully automated, so you don't have piloting skills required. The drone will fly up at 100 meters above, let's say, for instance, a vehicle. If it's integrated onto a vehicle, it can follow the vehicle dynamically. Accessible to anyone. And the goal is to make, obviously, better and faster decision when it's critical.
DNA?
Yep.
What about ATDI?
So ATDI is a 35 years old company. So we are present all around the world, and we are specialized in spectrum management at first, but for modeling every radio and everything around data again, and jamming and lots of things in our software. So as we talked a few minutes ago, we are present in Ukraine too. So we support Ukrainian army. I will not going inside details for many reasons, but we have a huge knowledge about this battlefield, and it's very good for us because with this knowledge we can build new products and huge expertise that we can share with MOD, for example.
Right. So if I can ask a question to both of you, actually, how have the past 6 months been in terms of business, and how have you coped really with, the defense emergency that is presenting itself at the moment? Maybe Guilhem, you want to start?
So what we have been experiencing on the ground is a growth in demand. Also, timelines of decisions are getting shorter. And customers and more users are more and more ready to buy off the shelf. So we have less customized requirements. So I think it's important, and it's a good thing for innovation. So at Elistair, what we've been working on mostly is securing our ramp-up, investing in production on one side, working obviously on getting better at supply chain resilience. And also we've been multiplying collaborations with other European SMEs through EDF projects and other type of partnership in order to create a coherent ecosystem around autonomous systems, because we see that end users, they don't want one solution, they want something that's interconnected, that's with a fast evolution. So it's very important to have this kind of interoperability to provide turnkey solutions.
What about you? How has it been over the past few months?
So the particularity of ETDI is that we produce software. So we are not a company like industrial, like yours, or we have lots of obligation for selling our product. We are not in this type of situation. But we thought about our strategy differently. We knew that Ministry of Defense has lots of questions on the table for Ukraine, but for lots of new material too, which just appeared during this conflict. So at first, we just created a strong link with MOD, not for having a huge contract and be the first, but to understand the real needs, because you have a real difference between people who are just behind their desk and thinking about how we can change things, and people who come from the field and know exactly how it works. So we had the both. First, we had a huge link with French embassy in Ukraine. We talked with DGA, and they give us lots of input about the situation. And secondly, we work with MOD about how we can work together with this knowledge. So we build something. And the second line is we work with supra-institutional, like NATO, for example, or European Defence Commission, to find a way to work together with other French companies too.
So one aspect that is quite important in all those BITD companies is the part of exports. Even if there's definitely a kind of urgency here in France, your two companies actually, and again, like the vast majority of companies in the sector, are really resolutely focused on exports. Is that a necessity for growth? What's the logic here, and what constraints actually do you face exporting your technologies to other countries? Guilhem?
So for Elistair, we started quite early. Actually, the first sales were export. We are in a specialized segment, so to have a sufficient reach in terms of revenues and scale, we needed that. We needed to target a larger audience than France only. And also what we've seen is that there are some countries, like mostly Anglo-Saxon culture countries, that have a different approach to innovation. And we've seen a faster adoption and a more pragmatic way of doing things. For instance, usually they buy first system. When you need, test it, learn from it, share the results, and then scale the programs, which helped us a lot at the beginning when we were a very early startup and exporting, so we needed that. And then in terms of constraints, obviously it's a bit harder because first, and it's also a good thing, you have to build a very strong product market fit. So the value that's very differentiated, and you are competing globally. So it forced us to be very compelling on the market and better than on our, at least, field than competition, but abroad. I think that was a good constraint to have. The second aspect is cost, especially time and cost. So going abroad with a vast variety of countries means more cost in terms of sales cycle, branding, because you have to build trust, especially when you are starting, innovating, and far away. How do you support your end users? And the third aspect is export control. When you start the company, obviously you have a small team, so you don't have like a X people team on the export control. You are doing yourself. So we needed external help on that, and build it also gradually.
And Vianney, you're moving to the US actually next week.
Yeah, next week.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty ready. But the company too, in fact, moving is in the DNA of ETDI because we are all around the world since more than 20 years. And the last 6 months was not a huge change for us because we have lots of team around the world who can give us some information for how to react with all this situation. So we are very focused on every geopolitical situation, of course, but we manage our team and we trust them to know exactly how to deal with lots of things. But I join you, Guilhem, because I'm starting in United States and we can see that things change very fast because of political situation, but not only, because you have lots of huge players, key players who just appeared since like 2 or 3 months, and it's a little bit different and we have to adapt our strategy month by month and not for a year. So in terms of income, invest, and lots of things, we can have huge partners like Audacia, for example, who are just near to us to support us, but you have to think differently. So it's a huge exercise, but it's good, and I think this is why our company exists. It's because we are always on the move.
And who are these new players that are coming to the market suddenly? What kind of players is that? American players or?
Yeah, you have American players because honestly, if you are an European company, you can't just arrive in the game and say, hey, I have a huge project, a very good product, so just pay me. It doesn't work like that. Even in France, I think DGA will say to us, but I think it doesn't work like that. So you have to find the good integrator, the good company who will accept to work with you. And in this situation, you have many companies who understand that it's important to integrate new solution, stranger solution, like us, French. So you have to deal with them to compare with US solution, why you are so good and why you are an expert and how you can deal with them. So new player arrive because they decide to integrate lots of technology, like yours maybe, Guilhem. And so you are not just face-to-face with traditional concurrents, but by new company would just lied and try to play the same game like yours.
Right. Jean-Baptiste, we spoke about export controls. What is the position of the DGA on this topic exactly? What does it mean, export control? How do you look at this?
Yes, I mean, we promote exports for our defense companies because for us it's a matter of resilience. We talked about resilience earlier. Being resilient for a defense company in France is being dual and exporting. So we promote it. But at the same time, we have to control because you don't want to allow any company to export critical military components, for instance. So it's always a very strong legislation. And it's, I think, perfectly legitimate. So whether you have dual-use equipment or military-only equipment, two distinct procedures, but I mean, it's the same principle. Maybe for some small companies, for some SMEs, when the first time they export, it can be a lot of paperwork and can be hard to understand. And maybe that's where we have to improve. But we already have, first of all, the International Directorate of the DGA, which is supposed to support the companies who want to export. And we have, I mentioned it before the webinar, our hotline, where companies can phone or write to us saying, okay, I want to export, I'm not sure about the procedures, how it works. And we answer them in less than 2 days. So it's complicated, but it's a necessary complication. But it should not prevent companies to export because we think that in this geopolitics, the current geopolitics, many countries have announced that they want to put the defense efforts at 5%, 3.5% when at a current perimeter, constant perimeter. But it means that there are some significant market shares to be taken by these companies. So,
are there actually cases where you will say, no, you can't export that?
Yes, because you don't want a company to export in a country where we think that they are waging war in a manner that is not appropriate, etc. So, and you can allow the export of the component, but forbid the re-export of the component, or allow the export, but for a certain use only, defensive, for instance, and we control that. And I think that the civil society would agree with that, because I think it's good to control that.
Definitely. You spoke earlier about consolidation. Is that something that you guys see as well? Is there too many companies, too many drone companies in Europe, for instance? Or, Guilhem, what do you think of this consolidation issue?
So, as of the drone sector, maybe a comparison with the US and China is a good point to start. In China, there's one big player that has 70% of the market. It's a $4 billion company called DJI. In the US, the largest players are around 600 million to 700 million. And in Europe, it's 100. So it's a big topic. Obviously, why we need bigger players is 3 points. First, we need efficiencies of economies of scale in terms of cost, in terms of obviously making the technology available in a broader manner. Second is program readiness. For large programs, you need obviously scale to be able to ramp up fast, deliver and also provide long-term support, which is a requirement for large end users. And last one is investor appeal. Obviously, if you have a sufficient scale, then you draw more attention. The investment is safer, and then you can even scale faster. So I'd say consolidation is one way of doing it. Creating a scale-up is another one. So you can. So I'd say yes, there is a need for bigger players like mid-size and more in Europe to build 1, 2, 3 large drone champions. Can do it through consolidation or through massive investment and scaling them.
Vianney?
I agree with you with the same argument, but I would like to add one thing, is to play with big players, with key players, you can just add lots of small players. And for us, in our area, in spectrum electronic management and electronic warfare, you can provide a large solution with many SME. And I think consolidation could be the great things for being a huge player in battlefield like Ukraine or many other countries, because in France we have lots of technology, we know how to use it, but we don't have time to consolidate it. And everybody wants just to go abroad and don't think about why we don't create a common product, a French common product who can be a competitor just in front of huge big foreign player.
So one interesting aspect as well, I think, is both of your companies are actually developing highly technological solutions. I have when I look at the R&D budget of the Ministry of Defense in America, for instance, we're talking about $140 billion, 16% of the total budget. Here in Europe, numbers are a lot smaller, probably around 4 or 5% of the total, which is like 13 or 14 billion euros in total at European level. Do you think Europe is giving itself the means to become a technology champion in the defense sector, or is there more to do there?
Obviously, there's more to do. The scale between Europe and so we are making progress. That's a fact. If we compare the US and China, for instance, like global peers for Europe, there's a 10 times ratio between the US and Europe in terms of pure R&D spendings in technology, and a 3x ratio with China. So there is a scale topic, but also I think there's efficiency, some inefficiencies and progress to make. Maybe I can share some experience we've had with Elistair navigating funding for technology in the past 10 years. First, in terms of, it's very fragmented, the budget. We talked a bit about it before. Obviously, we have some pan-European drivers like EDF and HEDI, but it's still quite marginal compared to what DARPA, AFWERX, and in the US, those kind of drivers can do. Also, our ways of doing things is mainly iterative. So we invest in collaboration, interoperability, which are important things, but a lot less, we don't have the capability to invest on disruptive technologies. And what is at stake is our future potential dependence in key next-gen areas like AI, autonomy, space. So that's the race is now, and we don't want to miss that. So fragmented. I'd say also for SMEs, which are a big part of where the innovation takes place, the funding is still hard to get. It's a kind of a hard path to navigate. We talked a bit about the VC funding. So there's this new energy coming. So things are changing, and we are seeing it. But it's true that the ratio in 2024 was like three times less VC funding in Europe than in the US, for instance. So there's still this gap to cross. Banking. So we are currently working on ESG, those type of blocking to help startups access to bank fundings. So that's very important. And then there is, maybe to finish, a spirit of, we have grants, subsidies. So it's been very helpful, obviously, and at the European scale and in France. But what we see also is that there is another very interesting way of funding startups is early stage contracts. To help them cross from, so grants will fund mostly ideas, at the lab level. But how do you cross from the lab to the battlefield? And for that, early stage contracts directly to SMEs, not through primes or intermediary. It's very important. It gives startups credibility, references, live testing from the field, so product value. So I think it's something kind of a shift we have to make from a very grants-based model in Europe to a more early stage, like what we've been seeing in the US.
Vianney.
I agree, but as we talked a few minutes ago, I think it's a little bit tricky to talk about United States and China and compare it to Europe, because this is not the same way of doing economics. We have huge economic patriotism inside Europe between all the countries. And what I didn't say when I began, but ATDI is a member of NIAG, which is the NATO Industrial Advisor Group, and we are part of the GCAT2 and Cercle Richelieu and lots of things. So in terms of international work, when we decide to work, for example, in NATO with European country, honestly, it doesn't work because every country just wants to push its own product. So that's why I'm sorry, but about this question, I will not go in the same way like you because I think it's too tricky to think like that. Everything is playing in local way, in local political way. But talking about Europe and finance to push development, I wish it will happen, but right now, our experience, it will not happen. So, once again, we have a huge partner, financial partner, and it exists for SME and lots of company. But I will tell you something, when the war began very hard, very boomy, as they said in Ukraine, so Europeans decide to put lots of funds on the table, right? You remember about this billion of euros that we talked about. And I remember I went with Thales in Brussels and I met the European defense, French European defense, and I asked to them, okay, how does it work? How we can move? How I can push my software? I can develop it based on my experience, as we talked about a few minutes ago. And I remember that the French European defense guy was like, it's not as easy as you think, because this amount that we talk about, it will be a bit tricky to push it on the table because it's 5% of the budget and it takes time and it needs time. So, okay, I said, I will go back in a few months. And I began to work in all this commission and everything. And I just realized that we have help from France for all of that. And thanks, DGA, because you have a special office for pushing company inside Europe. But it doesn't work with all other competitors inside Europe. So we can talk about China, United States, and Europe because we don't play the same game.
Okay. Thomas, we haven't heard you yet. You're the guy everybody's relying on here at the table, like the role of private equity seems to be intensifying in the defense topic. So how do you see this evolving? How's the appetite from investors there? And one aspect as well, in the past there's been a lot of, let's say, ESG constraints in the sector. We're seeing some of that being lifted at the moment. Is it also your opinion?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Eric. So I think the private equity has a key role to play, like in any growing and developing economic sector. Defense industry now needs strong partners, and private equity stands out for this because it can provide two major contributions. One is obvious, is equity money, capital, and the other one is the expertise in structuring sustainable and robust growth, and that's a key point. And so that's why private equity has become a necessity for industry of defense. Jean-Baptiste spoke about that a few minutes ago, about the famous meeting organized in last March in Bercy around our two ministers of the economy of the armed forces. And it's the starting point, I think, of a great contribution, collaboration between those two worlds. About the appetite of the investors, I think this appetite is growing. Just two figures to illustrate. The French private equity invested like 9 billion euros over the last 20 years, and of which 4 billion over the last 5 years. So the appetite is clearly growing. In my opinion, there are three reasons of this growth. First one is also obvious. It's because you have, without stability, peace, or security, you have no prosperity. So it's a condition. That's the first point. Second reason is that private equity actors like, they like industrial epopee, they like challenges, and there are a lot of challenge in the defense industry today. I think there are two major challenges. The first one is technological, because the future of defense relies on innovation, and France, Europe is not. It's not late like this, but innovation, it's a perpetual need. So private equity investors are required for this. And the second challenge is a capacity challenge. We have to scale up. We have to invest more. I think our BITD is as exceptional asset in France regarding the size of our country, because we can produce everything. We have 9 major industrial contractors, but we can produce everything, but we do not produce enough. So we have to increase our efforts. And that's why private equity is required. And finally, about the ESG exclusions, world has changed, and the French Minister of Economy was very clear in March. He said there was a misunderstanding because investing in defense is a responsible investment. It's maybe the first responsible investment. Just you have ecological security, but you have the security avoiding war. So
and they make
it's very clear for us now.
And they make the difference between investing in controversial,
controversial weapons are excluded, and they will be excluded in the future, but.
Say forbidden weapons now.
Forbidden.
Say that controversial is controversial.
All right. And do you think we have enough firepower in Europe without asking our American friends to join the party in terms of private equity?
I think we can do without our American friends, and we were invited to do without them. We all remember the famous speech of G.D. Vance in Munich a few months ago. But I think, Jean-Baptiste, or it was you who spoke about the great European plan, Rearm Europe. So I think Europe has the means to increase its effort on defense, and also the financial actors have also the means to help, because like the dry powder, for private equity funds in Europe, it's like 350 billion euros, and in France it's like 50 billion euros. And we are talking about the need in equity for small and mid-cap companies of the BITD is like between 1 to 3 billion. So I think it's a question of priority, and we can focus on this and invest on the defense industry.
So Jean-Baptiste, that raises as well the question of capital control. We spoke about export control, but there's also capital control. What's the position? How is it evolving in the current geopolitical context?
Well, here again, like with export control, you have to find the right balance, because it's perfectly legitimate to have this capital control on strategic companies. You don't want strategic SMEs being bought by, for instance, a Chinese bank or anyone. It's understandable. But at the same time, we keep saying we have to attract investors, and they focus on liquidity. So will they be able to resell their acquisition? So what we say at the DGA is that this control that we that is a prerogative of the Ministry of Finance, Economy, but we, as DGA, we give our avis, expertise, yeah, and we say, okay, this is a critical company, so we suggest that we have to refuse, for instance, acquisition. So first of all, there are very few refusals, very, very few. In most cases, we accept the investment, but with conditions. And contrary to what you may think, for instance, US companies really like to comply, to abide by the rules and say, okay, we will respect all the commitments because they want to access the European market. So that's for the general principle. So we have to find this balance, and I think we have the right balance. But since Trump election, we ask ourselves some questions saying, okay, will the it's still, of course, our ally, a friend, but we're not too naive to. So we observe what's going on and saying, okay, do we have to be more restrictive on this control or not? So that's a question it's still being discussed at a very high level. But everyone is aware that we cannot, on the one hand, say, okay, you have to come to the defense industry, where you have to put your money, but we will forbid you to sell to any extra European player. So it's not possible. So we are aware of that.
Right, it's such a big issue because obviously I think more than half of the private equity transactions are coming from American, funds at the moment. So.
Yes, but maybe last thing is that we have more globally to work on the financing of the economy and of the industry, because if a significant share of the transaction are going to the US, it's because we lack private equity funds being able to buy the companies that have grown significantly. And so that we are working on that too with our colleagues from the Ministry of Finance.
So Thomas, how do you actually approach your investment? How do you look at them? Is it a technology-first approach? Do you look at a certain percentage of civilian activity versus military activity? Do you want a certain amount of experts? What's the approach for you?
Well, our approach, so we are launching a new fund dedicated to the defense industry. It's called Straton, from the Greek, for the armies. And well, we focus on on our expertise, what we did in the past, financing more than 350 small companies. So we are minority shareholders. We target companies between like 10 to 50 million euros revenue, already profitable, and with a clear vision. And we will try to select companies useful for the defense industry. Clearly, our idea is to focus on dual use, but it's most companies of the BITD are dual use, so it's obvious and it can limit the risk, and also the export potential to avoid to depend only on the public French command. Well, this is our specificity in Audacia because there are several funds, several private equity actors launching new funds dedicated to defense, but a large part of them are focused on big tickets, 30 million tickets or 40, 50, and on mid-sized companies. And we focus on smaller ones because this is for one reason, what we are used to do, and also because this is the large part of the BEI today, and what is at stake. The aim is to consolidate this market, to build stronger actors.
And how do you think about what's your exit strategy? How do you look at that?
Well, there is, I think, a persistent myth about what we're talking about the risk of stopping the transaction because for sovereignty reasons. But last year, over 140 files were instructed by the Commission, and only 2 were refused because Chinese funds were targeting the company. So we are not really afraid of that because of the statistics, and also because since we are minority shareholders, so when we sell the company, well, we sell our stakes. Usually there is no change of control. And since we are in small companies, they are a large part of financial or industrial French actors or European actors. So it's not a real fear for us.
Okay.
And maybe one thing about the link between return on investment and also defense financing, because there is another persistent myth, but they are contradictory. I mean, if you invest in defense, you can't produce return on investment, and maybe this is a very French idea because our public finances are suffering. So there is this idea that states will contract the margin, and well, it will be a patriotic investment, but not a financial investment. And just 2 figures to show you that it's not true. If you consider large groups, the stock price of Thales has increased 5-fold in 5 years, and Dassault was tripled. So it's clear, and from my own experience of financing small companies, we may have like 10 of them, and they were performing. I have one example of an industrial contractor, subcontractor. So you are industry, and the EBITDA margin are above 25%. So, but it's not surprising because we are in an ecosystem of excellence. You have the first excellence is the operational excellence of our armed forces, and to match this, you need industrial and technological excellence. This produces economic excellence in those small companies, and at the end, for the investors, it's financial performance.
Do you think we should find ways to open private equity to individual savings in France? I know that's a question that has been discussed at BPI France as well. And do you think that's the key as well to increase investment in this sector?
I would say it's one of the key, given the sector's capital needs. All the ways should be regarded and considered. So it can be a way. A recent survey showed that like 2/3 of the French ménage can consider an investment in defense. It depends of the performance, but they can consider it. But I think it's a sovereign domain. So it's regard especially the states, the institutionals also. But BPI, the public French bank, has opened a way with this fund in which you can subscribe to from 500 euros. So it's few.
Is that something that is encouraged as well on your side?
With prudence, because we think it's good for the link between the nation and the defense industry, and there is some demand, as you mentioned, for that. And so the future BPI fund of 450 million euros will allow that. I think it's a good opportunity. It may not be fully needed because I think there is enough money, enough dry powder for the need. And prudence, why? Because many people are still financially literate, if I may say, and what they want is liquidity and a safe return. Maybe not always aware that investing in SMEs, in ramping up SMEs. It can be a very good thing, but it can be very dangerous too for their finance. So we say, okay, why not? Very interesting for strengthening the link between the nation and its industry, but let's be cautious too. It should not be the substitute for public orders or other things.
All right. Well, almost time's up. Maybe let's give ourselves 30 seconds each to basically give what the top priorities in the coming months should be to effectively deal with the defense emergency in Europe. Do you want to start, Hadrien?
Okay, let's start very shortly. First, the defense shift is not a choice, that's a necessity. And we have to buy more European products, as France exports only 15% of its total export to Europe, and a lot to Middle East and Asia, so first buy European. Defense extra spending will add GDP from close to 0.6 by 28 and close to 1.6 by 2035, so that's huge, and so that's a boost for economics, so that's a good news. And to finish, what to manage this defense shift? We need innovative and competitive companies, and we have some brilliant examples here. We need the support of the state, and Jean-Baptiste was here to say that the state was here. And to finish, we need private investors, such as Audacia.
Would you like to give us your top priority for the next?
Yeah, maybe very quickly. We said that there is a very good and positive dynamic since several months regarding the access to finance for defense SMEs, with many investors looking at these SMEs. So now it has to be converted into real transactions and real consolidations, etc. So made this dynamic transform into something very concrete, because it's highly critical in the current situation.
Vianney?
It would be more an industrial point of view, but yes, maybe we know that in France we have technology, and in Europe we have technology, we have material, we have knowledge, so just build a complete solution and be present abroad. Agree with you, Jean-Baptiste.
Guilhem?
Yeah, so I agree, we have the talents, we have the people. I will add on the innovation side that building a complement to grants with early stage contract and betting on SMEs that have ready to deploy off-the-shelf system and help them grow is important. And we have to build a more resilient supply chain also, and remove what we discussed about, remove all the frictions for access to capital. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's very positive, and we have a lot of progress ongoing.
Thomas?
And well, to finish, reconstituting a solid defense industry takes like 10 years. So I think the times are at mobilization. It's a very special military term, but we need a great collaboration of all the living forces of the nation, financial, industrial people. So I think we can do it.
And finally, I will ask my colleague Laurence Porruncini to give us a few words of conclusion and wisdom at the end of this webinar. Laurence, the floor is yours.
Thank you all for being here today. It was very insightful, and maybe 5 key messages that we heard today. First, very briefly, it's very critical to foster stronger collaboration, not only within the large players, but also with SMEs and new tech players, so meaning different type of players. It's very important. First, what we heard today is that now being dual is part of the game. There is no question about that, and it's a very critical transformation also for both entrepreneurs. The third message that we heard today, it's now obvious, but the worlds will be and are technological worlds at the moment. That's very important. Also, what we heard today, that's the situation regarding the ecosystem landscape, maybe within France, but not only also in Europe. We are in a fragmented sectors, so consolidation is part of the game and could be one of the solution, not the solution, but the way to achieve some challenges. The last but not least, we heard also, and thanks Thomas for your intervention, that now for investors, defense is now an investment thesis like others investment thesis. Now for that, I didn't mention the bank, but I will do. Because for us, the banking institutions are part of the game, and we have to be there to answer all the questions and the challenges in this new geopolitical landscape. For instance, few figures, and we talk about, let's say, what we've done here at Groupe BPCE and Natixis. We are part of the game, and we followed and we contribute to almost 20% of to the financing to the defense sector in France. That's just a way to achieve and where we stand at the moment. As a financial sector, I think, and we think together with also investors, we need to de-risk the business models of the companies, particularly the one from the BITD, which are smaller and maybe, let's say, at risk at some points. So it means that as a financial investor, we need to have and to give them opportunities to grow outside France, to reduce dependence on public contracts, and also encouraging, as I said, consolidation, and also that's maybe a few messages that have been discussed today. Recapitalization needs, it's important. For financial institution, being part of the game is not only that. For us, it's also very important, and we need to update our defense financing policies, and we are currently working on that, which I think it's very important. We need to offer a range of financing solutions, meaning, let's say, cash flow solutions, short-term solutions to finance their needs. Also, as I said, addressing equity needs. As you understand, challenges are complex, but opportunities are also there. And if we work together, I think we could be part of the game and be able to achieve that. Thank you all for being today, and it was very great discussion that we could follow up on then.
Thank you very much, Laurence. Very quickly, we have one question here from the public. I think it's for you guys. Do your respective strategies address the need to harmonize military materials and equipment and infrastructures in Europe? We mentioned a little bit that, you know, your clients were looking for off-the-shelf kind of things now, but is that something that you address more specifically?
Yes, we are. So on the drone side, we are working on interoperability because obviously the end users need a common operating system. They need to interface the drone. It's only one part of the global system. So you have standards like the STANAGs, like you know, we are building APIs so the system can communicate with other third parties. So that's one big part, yes, of the development.
In ETDI, the software was created with interoperability, so we can work with every hardware. And like, not every, but most of the hardware can be just plugged to our software to work. So yes, we are in this line too.
And I think it's interesting, this question of harmonization of equipment. I mean, in Europe, we have like something like 12 battle tank, you know, programs. In the US, they have one only. And I think we could look at pretty much every domain, and it's something like that, right? How do you?
Yeah, maybe you have noticed that in Europe we have 27 countries, and as it was mentioned earlier, I think it's. I mean, we all wish it would be simpler. It's not, for the moment, and I see no other solution than building more trust between countries. Today we have very strong cooperation, the FCAS, the MGCS, etc., and European companies, Airbus, for instance, of course. But we need more trust between countries and less rivalries. For that, it does not depend on us, depends on everyone, and so.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gentlemen, Laurence, thank you very much for your time today. It was a pleasure to have you here in the studio. I think it was really interesting. This is a super important topic. And I think we're going to continue to talk a lot about defense in the coming months. Thank you for your time. And hopefully, let's keep in touch and see how we all do in the defense world going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.